Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I rise to speak to Part 2 of the Resource Management Reform Bill. Mr Chairman, there are two parts of this bill that Labor has been particularly concerned about. And one we have addressed and unsuccessfully addressed in the Part 1 of the bill, and that was around protection of trees. The second part that concerns us is this is actually the swipe at local democracy that is contained in Part 2, which is the bit under discussion at the moment and covers the Auckland transitional provisions. Mr Chairman, before I get on to clause 125, which I want to deal with in some detail, I want first to address clause 124, which talks about transitional regulations. Transitional regulations are always problematic, and it's my great hope that one day the national members of the Regulations Review Committee will allow us to do an inquiry into transitional regulations, because they are the place where the devil lies. In other words, they do contain the detail of a bill, and we all are familiar with that expression, that the devil is in the detail. Transitional provisions, Mr Chairman, do allow governments to put in by regulation something that does not come before this House for scrutiny. And this was one of our concerns originally, and it caused us to draw attention to this in the minority report at the beginning of the preamble to the amended Resource Management Reform Bill, Mr Chair, as it now sits in front of the House. So we said in that minority report that we originally had concerns over this bill because it vested in the Minister the power to make regulations which could conceivably pervert the course of the original intention, that is, of the Act, one of these Henry VIII provisions. But that power was amended by the Select Committee, and so that did achieve some change by the Select Committee, so that it amended it in particular in clause 6A by saying, in addition, clause 6A, in addition, the Minister for the Environment must not recommend the making of regulations unless he or she has first consulted the Auckland Council and the hearings panel, if it exists then, on the proposed regulations. That's an improvement, Mr Chairman, but we are still left puzzled as to why legislation to turn other transitional provisions into primary legislation, such as the Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Bill number 2, was introduced to the House for its first reading on the 5th of June of this year, before this report, the report on this bill, had ever been submitted to the House. So that legislation I've just referred to, the Local Government (brackets Auckland Council) close brackets Amendment Bill number 2, should be blended with the work in this bill in order to ensure that there is not unnecessary amendment required later. But, Mr Chair, my particular concerns lie with clause 125, which is very substantial. So clause 125 goes on for page after page after page because it inserts a new part 4. And so while we debate today parts 1, 2 and 3 of the bill, this is in part 2 the addition, the insertion of a new part 4. And this is where some of our concerns become obvious, because they are about the role of the Auckland Council, a democratically elected body, to have some say in the process for development of the first combined plan for Auckland Council. Now, of course, the Auckland Council has had a very robust and quite profound, Mr Chairman.
Honourable Miriam Street.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And quite profound public consultation process over the development of its plan, and that is to be commended. But what I want to do is speak in favour of Eugenie Sage's supplementary order paper number 281. Quite simply and yet quite profoundly, she seeks to insert the words "and Auckland Council" into every part of this clause, which is 115, but also the new section 155, where the Ministers of Environment and Conservation have powers. And she has recommended in the amendment in Supplementary Order Paper 281 that at every point where the Ministers of Conservation and Environment have powers, that the Auckland Council be included in those powers, that there be some sharing of power in the decisions that pertain to both of these clauses. So first of all, in new clause 115, there is the ability for the Auckland Council to forward all relevant information to a specialist hearings panel appointed by the Minister for the Environment and the Minister of Conservation. This is the first moment in this part of the bill where Eugenie Sage's SOP seeks to insert "and Auckland Council", so that a hearings panel, a specialist hearings panel, would be appointed by the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Conservation, Minister of Conservation, and the Auckland Council. And this really begins then to find its feet when we come over, this SOP begins to find its feet beyond that mention when we get to new clause 155, which is all about the setting up of a hearings panel. And at every point, it seems to me to be absolutely not just a matter of right for the people of Auckland, but a matter of common sense, that something as large as the Auckland Council, a body as large as that, representing a population as large as that, ought to be involved in the appointment of hearings panels that are going to determine whether an application is able to go ahead. And so at every point in that clause, and in clause 157 as well, and 162, which involves consultation, the member Eugenie Sage simply seeks to reinforce democracy, and her SOP has our support in that regard. Mr Chairman, finally I'd also like to talk to the member Eugenie Sage's SOP number 283, and this is the one which talks about the scope of the hearings panel. Currently, Mr Chair, in the bill as it is, it says that the hearings panel is not limited to making recommendations only within the scope of the submissions made on any proposed plan, but it may also make recommendations on any other matters relating to the proposed plan identified by the panel or any other person during the hearing. So in other words, people can come and present to a hearings panel with ideas that have never been considered previously, and there is the ability of the hearings panel to consider things that are outside the scope of the plan. So this could be taken to mean any number of things. Let's add a development, a residential development block here when we're actually talking about a park or a green area. This really opens a floodgate, and that is closed if we can see our way clear to supporting the member's SOP number 283, which requires that that the hearings panel only considers things that are within scope and not outside of it. That is a common sense and a legitimate amendment to make. The bill as it stands in that respect, Mr Chair, is too broad.
The Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr Chair, I just want to take a call on this part to respond to a few of the last speakers we've had on this issue of the appointment to the board, because I do think it's an important process and it's worth taking some time to respond to. And